Hey, folks, this is Andras.
And this is Brian.
And this is our regular little intro before we dip into these. We record these months before they come out, and things change. Like, for instance, this week we're talking about Rules Don't Apply. And since recording the episode, I had the chance to listen to Karina Longworth's book, Seduction, Sex, Lies, and Stardom in Howard Hughes' Hollywood, which I listened to on Audible, and you can download, or if you're an actual reader, you could actually read the thing. And if you want to know more about Howard Hughes and what a strange and terrible person he was, I highly recommend this book. So check it out to find out more about Howard Hughes. Of course, we also, in this episode, talk about The Aviator. We talk about F for Fake. There's a lot of material about Howard Hughes, so you don't have to get all your information from Rules Don't Apply. But we do hope you watch Rules Don't Apply, right, Brian?
Yeah, make sure to, with every episode we do, watch the movie first, because we will go into spoilers. This one we don't so much, but in other movies, like in any movie, it's good to go in fresh before people start gabbing about it so much. So go in with your own opinion first, and maybe it's fun if you come in with the wrong opinion and then we change your mind. So make sure to watch it, like pause this, go watch it, come back, listen to the rest of this.
And speaking about wrong opinions, this episode features a wrong opinion. At the very end, a little spoiler alert here for our show. If you don't have the end of our show spoiled, skip over this right now and then come back to it at the end to find out what we did that was wrong.
Well, just like, because, like you said, we do this so many months in advance, we have been attempting these last few episodes, and we keep doing it, to guess where we're at on my other podcast, The Director's Wall, like where we're at in Coppola's filmography. I optimistically stated, I bet we'll be at the Cotton Club. Well, we're probably currently 6 episodes behind the Cotton Club. We're probably not going to get to the Cotton Club till 2021. So, man, was I way off on that one. I should not be a betting man, and I'm not. So, don't listen to my opinion on anything in terms of predictions. Nostradamus, I am not.
So, what Coppola film are you at in the Director's Wall podcast at this point?
We are at One from the Heart, and we're not even going to get to the next one was Hammett, which you're not going to talk about until early November. So you got a bit of time to catch up. So if you haven't heard it, you have time to catch up before the next episode.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but both One from the Heart and Hammett feature actors wearing thin mustaches akin to Howard Hughes' famous mustache. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's just a thing that, certain creatives are into. I'm into it. I like a thin mustache.
Well, I feel like, maybe the Hitler mustache sets the tone of that. The mustache is most well known by the worst person who wore it. So I think we have to refer to that as the Howard Hughes mustache.
Oh, don't ruin the thin mustache. It existed long before. It's not associated with him. And he
Charlie Chaplin Charlie Chaplin had that mustache before Hitler did, but nobody calls it the Chaplin mustache. Anyway, sorry, this could be a whole episode in and of itself. How the world is wrong about mustaches and the men who wore them. But there is one other mistake I made in this episode. I accidentally called Boots Brown and his Blockbusters song Cerveza tequila. It's a mistake, and I'm sorry. So, let's just get to this episode, shall we?
Let's do it.
Andras here. When I'm not co-hosting The World is Wrong podcast, I'm hosting and producing the Radio 8-Ball podcast, where we answer questions by picking songs at random, like picking musical tarot cards. We've hosted musical divinations for people like John C. Reilly, Patricia Arquette, Tig Notaro, and Fred Armisen, and hosted over 200 songwriters, providing the randomly chosen answers from Inara George and Dan Byrne to Mose Allison and Alan Toussaint. That's Radio 8 Ball, all one word. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts and download our app from the iTunes App Store.
I'm Larry Bishop, and you're listening to the World is Wrong podcast.
We're here to tell you how the world is wrong. The world is wrong about
Rules don't apply. And welcome to the World is Wrong podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Andras Jones.
And I'm Brian Connolly, the other one.
The World is Wrong is a podcast, an extremely positive podcast where we celebrate films that have been maligned, misunderstood, ignored by audiences and critics. And yes, today we're covering one of my favorites, Rules Don't Apply, from Warren Beatty.
Man.
Oh, yeah. Came out in 2016.
Why don't you tell us about it? Tell us the plot. Tell us the gist of it.
Okay. I took extensive notes, so let me lay them on you.
Bankers. Big boys from New York.
From what I read, bankers work in extremely conventional ways. I don't pretend to understand the airline business, but I'm told you say propellers are a thing of the past.
Well, I think your mother probably thought I was okay as long as she was sure that we had nothing to do with each other.
I think she thought that if I'd been just one of those girls, you wouldn't have real respect for my integrity.
Huh.
I mean, I guess a girl's always got a reputation to think about.
Well, I guess a man always has a reputation to think about. Mr. Forrester?
Mr. Hughes?
Listen, I don't think there's any real necessity for us to meet. I mean, there's no reason why we can't do this on the telephone.
Well, let me be plain, sir. I am not authorized to approve our venture to lend you $400 million unless we meet. Mr. Hughes? Mr. Hughes?
If there's a Stella Starlight script, you could have fooled me. Did you look at my screen test?
Mr. Hughes, please just tell us what bungalow you're in. It would be so very easy.
We're 14 feet away, 5 feet away, 20 feet away.
Which one is your bungalow? We'll come to you.
Mr. Forrester? I'm sorry, I don't think there's any need for us to actually meet.
Yeah,
There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do this on the telephone.
Mr. Hughes. Mr. Hughes?
These guys want to have a face-to-face meeting with me and then be able to say I'm crazy, and then I'll have to give up control of TWA to them. It's just...
Well, maybe you'd teach him a lesson if you just gave it to him.
Then they could sue me for a whole lot of money, and then they may come after my daddy's company, and so I really can't afford to let them make me some kind of a psychiatric case. I would leave this country and never come back. I'd leave this country and never come back. I'd leave this country and never come back. You know? I'd leave this country and never come back. I'd leave this country and never come back. What am I going to do? They just have a face-to-face meeting with me and then call me a nut?
Well, that's ridiculous. And you have all your own people around you who you know you can trust.
May I give you some advice?
Yes.
Never trust anybody. Not me, not anybody. They're not your mommy or your daddy. The only person you can trust is you.
So Rules Don't Apply is a biopic wrapped in a Wellesian lie of a film, wrapped in a love story that speaks to the sweep of history, American history, and Warren Beatty's history. Like all of Warren Beatty's films, Rules Don't Apply is political and romantic and funny and tragic and always, on some level, about Warren Beatty. So it's personal as well. The opening scene tells us just how much the film's title is going to inform the movie we're about to watch. It opens with a quote from Howard Hughes saying, "Never check an interesting fact," followed by the note, Names and dates have been changed, and boy, have they ever. We open on the moment in which Howard Hughes is being asked to challenge the false claims made by Clifford Irving, which were also covered in Orson Welles' film F for Fake, in which Welles demonstrated the magic and the lie of film editing and film itself to distort time and the truth. Rules Don't Apply tells us the date is 1964, but this event took place in 1972. They also call the author Richard Miskin when his name was Clifford Irving. So clearly, rules don't apply, right? There are so many nods to Citizen Kane in the opening that it's almost not even worth counting them all. They'll be really obvious to anyone who watches the film. So the film at the outset is telling us that it is not concerned with one kind of historical accuracy, but it's also telling us that it is like F for Fake in that it's a conversation with film itself, and like Citizen Kane with history itself. And I'm not just making these comparisons to Welles. I think if you watch the film and you have that background and understanding of Welles, clearly Beatty is stepping right in there. So then we're hopped back to 1959, the same year that Warren Beatty first came to Hollywood, where we hear Howard Hughes, Warren Beatty's first line in the film, through a radio, and he says, "I don't make mistakes." So he's just made a huge number of what would seem like factual errors, and then he's telling us, "I don't make mistakes." So let's just take him at his word there. So this is when we meet the stand-in for Beatty's well-coiffed, aw shucks, innocent, idealistic, young Beatty type, played by Alden Ehrenreich, an actor we're going to be covering a lot on this podcast. He plays Frank Forbes. Frank gets a job working as a driver for Hughes, and his duty is to shuttle actresses under contract to Hughes from their rented homes in the Hollywood Hills to the studio, as well as to, we must assume, some personal assignations with Hughes himself. One of these, to whom Ehrenreich's character is assigned, is Marla Maybury, played by Lily Collins. Marla is an aspiring actress and a songwriter, also the apple blossom queen, who comes to Hollywood under contract to Hughes with her deeply religious mother, played by Annette Bening. So this is a romance. So, of course, Ehrenreich and Collins' characters are immediately falling in love cinematically. But this is the sexually oppressive 50s, and he's engaged to a girl back home, and they are both deeply religious. And most importantly, the drivers are strictly forbidden to fraternize with the actresses who are under contract to Hughes, as Matthew Broderick's character, who's another one of the drivers, tells us at the outset. And so this the transactional sexism of Hughes's organization is commented upon really early in the film, and appropriately, by Benning's character, almost. And this is where the film seems to be talking with Beatty as much as it's talking with history. So his wife is there chiding sort of her husband's younger self for this thing of like having girls come to hotel rooms and all this nonsense. But the rest of the players in the film are either oblivious to or complicit in the situation until it bites them. And so the film's take on the youthful ambition, where it really focuses in on Ehrenreich's and Collins' character, is both loving and brutal. The film adores these kids, but it does not hide their ignorance from us. I don't want to divulge the details of the romantic plot, but it involves the kind of frustrating misunderstandings that drive lots of film romances. But we're in the hands of someone who knows how to handle this kind of thing, and the reveals are handled with a deft touch and hits all the right emotional notes as we come to our eventual union of our young lovers. But if you think this is a happy ending, you missed the magic trick, because this is Beatty's Howard Hughes film, after all, and he's been planning it for 40 years. So the film's deconstruction of Hughes through the wide shut eyes of our young protagonists is the political tragedy that drives it and is at the core of it. The fact that we see through him long before they do is one of the film's tricks. Rules Don't Apply isn't trying to tell us facts about or stories from Hughes's life. Scorsese and others have already done the heavy lifting there. So this frees up Beatty to focus on what he's best at, which is the dynamics of situations and the absurdity of those who are so invested in these systems that they can't see how absurd they've become. This is as true of Rules Don't Apply as it is of Bulworth and Reds and Shampoo and Bugsy, the films that I consider to be Warren Beatty's best. One of the emotional drivers of and this is one of the things that the high points and one of the things that really gets me about this film. One of the emotional drivers of the film, Rules Don't Apply, is its title song.
One day I told my friend I was terribly blue. Was it far too late to do what I dreamed I would do? He thought for a moment, then he answered. He said the rules don't apply to you. He said it very simply and quietly too, but as if there wasn't any doubt at all that he knew. He gave me a gift that I would treasure. He said the rules don't apply to you. In the movies we see, in the shows on TV, and in anthems passionately sung, there's a message that you've got to keep believing in yourself, but they generally mean if you're young.
And this has to be one of the best uses of an original song in a film that I can think of. It's performed several times, and each time it means something different, conveying new information to us right up until the closing credits, when a new and heartbreaking piece of the puzzle is revealed to those paying close attention. Lily Collins, who is the daughter of Phil Collins, sings the song like a songwriter, which means she doesn't do any of the annoying self-congratulatory vocal tricks that most singers on film make the mistake of employing to the detriment of good songs. She just sings the song in the room for one person. But, and this is what makes the film so interesting, the room is bugged. And that's Rules Don't Apply.
Very good. Woo! You've already started unpacking so much that this movie has to be unpacked. So why is the world wrong about Rules Don't Apply?
Well, I don't know why it's wrong, but I can tell you how it's wrong. And so, basically, it was a huge financial flop, leading to a lawsuit against Warren Beatty by the film's investors. So most people didn't see it. And I think even the people who saw it didn't see the movie I just described for the most part. I guess in general, I don't think that diehard film fans who would never miss a Scorsese or a Malick film, I just don't think they see Beatty that same way as a filmmaker. And I think they should. So here's the thing. Rules Don't Apply was released on November 23rd, 2016, while the audience that would be most interested in it, liberal boomers like Warren Beatty, were all still in shock from Trump's election and not really interested in watching a film about a skeezy old billionaire. I mean, I was looking forward to this film for years, and I wasn't ready for it when it came out. And it was gone fast. It was in and out of theaters super fast.
Yeah.
But I want to say, if Warren Beatty was aiming for Wellesian, he nailed it. Because Wells did not make hits. He made big, ambitious flops. So bravo, Warren. You made your Wellesian film. Now,
and as flops go, it is sort of like almost like an indie movie for Beatty, because his budget's only $25 million, which compared to like other movies he was involved in where the budgets were skyrocketing, this movie didn't actually lose as much money as some of the other ones that didn't do well.
Well, just to correct you, it's $35 million and it made 3.9. So his other movies that were big flops, I think still made more money than this. But I think, but the thing, so I want to talk about, and this is where we're going to get into something that's, I think, super exciting and maybe synchronistic about the film. So I listened to a lot of the interviews that Warren Beatty gave promoting the release of Rules Don't Apply. And one of the things he said in almost everyone that I heard, he would talk about how they say that character is plot. And then he would amplify it by saying, well, if character is plot, and particularly on film, casting is character, then casting is plot. That was what he said. And I'm sure he was speaking mostly about Ehrenreich and Collins, and of course of himself and Benning and the amazing cast of sort of famous supporting characters. But I think the most transcendent bit of casting was for him to cast future U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, who is also an investor in the film, as one of the corporate stooges from Merrill Lynch, led by Oliver Platt, who are trying to find Beatty/Hughes among the bungalows at the Beverly Hills Hotel in, I don't know about the film's climax, but a very important piece of the film. A very important, crucial moment in the film. And in these scenes, Mnuchin looks super dumb. So, and it's worth noting, and I don't entirely understand this, but I looked up in Wikipedia, Steve Mnuchin was outbid by Lone Star Funds on a portfolio of residential mortgage-backed collateralized debt obligations being sold by Merrill Lynch during the financial crisis, which sold for $6.7 billion. So, like I said, I don't understand that, but Warren Beatty clearly knew that Mnuchin, who was a big player in the housing crisis and was also a big player in Hollywood and a big investor in this film, that he had this connection to Merrill Lynch. So he put him in this movie with that awareness. Anyway, the thing is, I just love the idea that Beatty took Mnuchin's money and made him look like a goon in this film. And thus, he was able to do more to punish him for his financial crimes during the housing crisis and preemptively as part of Trump's cabinet than anyone else has been able to do so far. So Beatty stole millions of dollars from this thief to make a piece of art that made that particular thief look bad. And I don't know about you, but that, again, is a very Wellesian description of success. And I know I would feel a lot worse about this film if I thought Steve Mnuchin was making 1 penny off of it. So the fact that I think that its failure is part of its success for me. Like, I just feel like and that's the thing. There's no way Beatty could have planned that, but I think there's a certain genius to planting those seeds and allowing that kind of magic to flower from the production. And I think if we were to go deep into Beatty's filmography, we're just going to see that that's the kind of magic trick he's pulled off multiple times. So it's something we can't just write off and say, oh, well, that's just a happy accident. Because he kind of pulled a similar trick with Reds, taking a huge amount of money from Gulf and Western to make a film that was, positive about communists. He kind of did a similar trick with Bulworth. He kind of did a similar trick with Bonnie and Clyde. So, so that's how the world is wrong about this film. So Brian, I've been dying to talk with you about this film for years. We've been talking about it, and you just saw it this weekend. Tell me what you think about this film.
I'm just kind of stunned. I'm at the point where I don't know what I think about it, because it's not at all what I thought it was going to be. Because it was kind of sold as, I feel like the marketing for this movie was done very poorly, which maybe also is why it didn't do well. Like, they sold it as this like romantic comedy with Howard Hughes. It's like, I thought in my mind, I was like, oh, it's going to be like the movie IQ, where there's a romance going on. And then you have Albert Einstein, and this is like, oh, there's a romance going on, and you'll have a Howard Hughes sort of like helping these young people fall in love. But then, like, the first half hour of this movie, Howard Hughes is creepy, and you hate him, and it's scary, and like, you could totally change the soundtrack of like the first 40 minutes of the movie and just leave everything there as is, and it would be this sinister, creepy movie about dark Hollywood. Like, it's very interesting. The tone is just very strange, because I don't know. I definitely wouldn't label this movie just a comedy. It's like a little bit of everything, and it's just afterwards I just had an odd feeling, being like, I don't know what I thought that was going to be. Like, because it wasn't. Because, like, to me, Bulworth is like a comedy, and you go and being like, "Yep, that's a comedy," and it's dark, but I understand its tone. And Dick Tracy, I know, is going to be this like comic book adventure, and I know Reg is going to be this big drama with all these ideas. And so, I guess in a way, it's similar to Shampoo to me, another movie that I'm just baffled by, where I'm watching it being like, I don't know what I'm supposed to think. I don't really understand. Like, maybe I'm not smart enough to read between all the lines, but like a movie should be able to reach anybody. And so I'm just watching it, and then when it was done, I'm kind of like, what did I just watch? I'm very confused.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot going on.
Well, like you said, because right off the bat, I'm like, that didn't happen in 1964. That happened in 1972. What is the point of changing that? I know you're telling me at the beginning to not trust this stuff. But why are you having Howard Hughes crash his plane in the late 50s when that happened in the 40s? It's just like all these little things that he's playing with. And I did write down, it's funny you talked about it, I did write down, this is a movie not about Howard Hughes, this is a movie about Warren Beatty.
Yeah.
And if you're expecting a movie about Howard Hughes, rent The Aviator. Like, that is a movie about Howard Hughes, and you get all your details. And like, but this movie, like, 'cause I was really kind of nervous watching this, because like when I watch movies about people with obsessive compulsive disorder, it kind of like triggers that in me, like my own OCD. And like when I saw The Aviator, it certainly did. Like, it took me weeks to recover from The Aviator because that movie got it so correctly, like was so spot on, accurately of how those people's brains work. And then in this movie, they don't really go into it that much. They kind of make it more like he's got his codeine addiction? Is that what he's taking all the time? Is that right? Is it codeine?
I don't know.
Codeine addiction, and more just like he definitely has a problem. They talk about him being like he could be committed if he doesn't get married, but it doesn't go deep into, like, this isn't the tissue box on the feet Howard Hughes. Like, you get like a tiny glimpse of it, but it's not really about that. And I feel because it's Warren Beatty, he definitely makes Howard Hughes of this time more charming and more interactive with people than he probably actually was. Because Warren Beatty's not interested in playing a recluse who's not going to talk to anybody. That's not the kind of Howard Hughes he wants to play. So that kind of threw me off too, being like, oh, I wasn't expecting him to be like this kind of charismatic, like more like how the younger Howard Hughes maybe was. Yeah, and then it also has that problem, or not a problem, but that interesting thing that Terrence Malick movies have, where you see a really good actor for like a second, and then that's it. And then you're like, wait a minute, where did Ed Harris go? Like, I thought he was going to be in the movie, and then it makes you question, was there an hour taken out of this movie? Like, were these big actors, like, did Alec Baldwin have a scene, and we just didn't see more than that? Like you're giving roles to people that shouldn't be these great actors, but all of a sudden here's, one scene with Ed Harris and Amy Madigan. So just like, that always throws me off too. Being like, what is the intention of that? Because if you're going to think you're going to think about it when you see, Steve Coogan, you're going to say there's Steve Coogan, but then he's gone. And then what's crazy is looking at the cast, there's people in it that I don't even remember seeing. Dabney Coleman's in this movie. Where?
I know. I've been looking for. He's the Where's Waldo of Rules Don't Apply. Where is Dabney?
I know. Where's Paul Sorvino? Did I blink and miss Paul Sorvino? Where the heck where's he in this movie? Does he not recognize what old Paul Sorvino looks like?
Yeah.
And then halfway through, I was like, oh, that's Candice Bergen. Like, at first, I was like, is that Jenna Rollins? Who is that? And then I was like, oh, it's Candice Bergen, but she's just playing like a secretary. So it's like he's casting in these roles that, when written, seem like you just cast anybody, but he's putting these big stars in. And you're just sort of like, it's jarring because you're expecting there to be more from them, but then there isn't.
And yet,
so I wonder
what he made very clear in all of the interviews, casting is plot. So I feel like it's not just a matter of like, sort of like the thin red line where I can get all these people, John Travolta wants to show up and do a scene. Yeah, I'll take him, which is what it feels like in that movie. Mm-hmm. But in this, I feel like there is, whether or not we know the reasons, there are specific reasons why those people are in this film. And I don't, some of them, I agree with you. Like when Ed Harris and Amy Madigan show up for a scene, but I like that it's Ed Harris and Amy Madigan. He doesn't just have Ed Harris with another. Like there is a film history to those two. There's a real life history to those two that puts them in that place.
Yeah.
So there's a few different areas of this film that I wanted to discuss, if you're okay with it. You sort of touched on a couple of them, but I went deep on it. So first of all, I just want to list the time distortions in this film. You listed one already, the plane crash that supposedly happens in 1959, actually happened in 1946. We also have a scene where he's talking about bra designs for Jane Russell. That would have been between 1941 and 1948. Again, this is happening in 1959. We have him testifying before Congress in probably 1960, but that would have happened in 1947.
Yeah.
There's even one that doesn't there's no reason for it, but the Dodgers moved to LA in 1957, and they have this whole thing where they talk about the Dodgers moving to LA on the radio, just announced, and it's 1959, 1960. And then there's something, I don't know, I feel like there's something, since it's so intentional, I feel like there is something that he's not just playing fast and loose. Just like with the casting, he's trying to tell us something in that F for fake kind of way. Like, there's a big lie in here, and I'm trying to give you the feeling tone of what it's like to be inside of all these lies and to be disoriented by it. And also, like I said in my intro, and I think you're saying, if you want the biopic of Howard Hughes, go see The Aviator. I don't think
movie. Watch it.
It's great, but I don't think it's nearly as fun as this. I mean, it's sort of like Shampoo, like you said, like Shampoo. There's better movies about Nixon, but if you want to see a really fun movie about the effect of Nixon, go see Shampoo, because it's more about the feeling of it than the truth or the historical truth of it. So were there any other time distortion? Did you have any other insights to share on the time distortions?
There's a part where they're driving down Vegas Strip and they drive past a sign that says the review of 1955. And I'm like, but I thought it was 1959. And it's in the shot. So they have to be intentional, because anyone who edited this or looked at it over and over and would have noticed, because I noticed it the first time, that that's totally the wrong date. And and a lot of it is interesting because it kind of, you're right, it kind of plays into this sort of because this is when Howard Hughes is starting to get even more loopy and more shut off, and he's watching Hell's Angels over and over again. So even the time in his head is a different place. And then the movie plays with time in a weird way. When Lily Collins, I'm not going to give any plot away, but when she shows up many years later into certain people's lives, it feels like it was just yesterday for some, and for others it seems like a really long time. So just kind of playing with even how we perceive time and what that means. So then
another piece of this film that you've watched this film once. I've probably watched it now 6 or 7 times. And in this one, I was particularly focusing on the ways that Rules Don't Apply is speaking to Beatty's other films. So let's see, how can I say this all without giving away too much plot? So there is a scene that deals with some sort of sexual dysfunction on the part of Alden Ehrenreich's character. And that felt very much like it was speaking to Bonnie and Clyde, even in the way that scene is framed. It reminds me of a scene from Bonnie and Clyde with Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty that deals with sexual dysfunction of a different kind. So there's that. Then there's a scene where he has to go into a bathroom and use a blow dryer to cover up a sexual impropriety, which seems like right out of Shampoo.
Yeah.
There's a scene where he plays a saxophone, which takes me back to Heaven Can Wait. There's all the communism, anti-communism stuff. So there's Reds. There's scenes with him in a screening room, like from Bugsy. There's a scene with him going off script in a political scenario, like Bulworth. And the only one I could, and there's scenes with him in a hat. That's what made me think of Dick Tracy.
That's like Dick Tracy. There you go.
I couldn't find Dick Tracy very clearly, or Ishtar, or what's the one? A Love Affair. But I don't actually could see why Beatty wouldn't choose to reference those films. But I thought it was, if you start to look, especially when the blow dryer in the bathroom scene came on, I was like, okay, I'm onto something. He is giving us little tastes of Warren Beatty. And I guess also, and I read, there were a couple of good longer pieces about this film that I thought were appreciative when they came out. And they also drew a lot of connections to Splendor in the Grass, to the two characters and the sexual repression of the era, and that informs the Aaron Reich, Lily Collins. Also, I just wanted to throw this in there just as a weird thing. It's all double. It's Howard Hughes, HH, Frank Forbes, FF, Marla Maybury, MM. So the film's just doing a fun thing with that. Whether, I don't know if you want to get into the weeds of what that means, but you were saying that you felt like this was really about Warren Beatty more than being about Howard Hughes. How did you think so?
I just feel like just the way he plays the character of Howard Hughes. Like, Howard Hughes, I don't think was this likable, especially in the late 50s. Like, it has that charm and charisma of a Warren Beatty, and then also, like you said, but it has that sort of like creepy, like, but he like has a weird relationship with women. And he definitely leans into that. And it's interesting to, like, for the first half hour of the movie, basically be like, yeah, this guy controls and manipulates these women to the point where he's obsessed with, like, how their bras are. And it's just, you really don't like the character just when you hear about him. But then when you meet him, you're charmed by him because you can't help because it's Warren Beatty. So it's like, in a way, it's sort of like that. You hear about Warren Beatty's womanizing lives, but then you can't help but be charmed by him when you see him in a movie because he seems very charming. You know, and I think the movie does that interesting sort of like what you think about him before you meet him. I think that's really interesting. And that reminded me, this felt like a Warren Beatty thing. And then, just the, I don't know, just like the complexity of the whole thing. Like, and like, just the idea of people think they know or can put somebody in a box, but then there's so much more to it. Like, people think they know little things about Howard Hughes, but then they're learning more things, or you think you know where all of these characters are going to be. Like, you think you know what Marla Maybury's all about, and then she surprises you by, doing these different, like, vastly different, like, her personality shifts in certain scenes, not giving anything away. Like, she gets involved in events, they're like, oh, that doesn't seem like the Marla Maybury that I thought of the first 30 minutes would get involved in. And I feel that's very Warren Beatty. A lot of people, I think, because they think of him as this handsome actor that was in lots of movies, and a lot of people don't think of him as this master filmmaker who's actually really, really smart about filmmaking. And I think that, like, this movie hits on that time and time again, of like, you think you know on the surface what's going on with these people, and then you find out there's so much more interesting stuff behind those characters. And I feel that's Warren Beatty.
Yeah. Now, it's funny, I get what you mean by that Beatty plays the character with a certain amount of charm because he's Warren Beatty and he's charming. But I feel like the film does not hide that Howard Hughes is a villain.
Yeah, I think that is the most interesting thing about this movie. It's just like, it's like this conflict of like, people are saying these things about him that are horrible. They're like horrible things. But then he is charming in a way because he's Warren Beatty, so he can't help it. But then he's creepy again, or he's totally wrong about a thing. And it's like, there's certain characters that learn that kind of right away, that like, this guy may be a creep and I shouldn't be charmed by him. And other people take years and years for them to figure it out, that they don't want to be around this person anymore.
What I think, though, is that when I watch the film, I feel like as much as we're supposed to see Howard Hughes as an analog for Warren Beatty in the sense of like being a sexual, whatever, a sexual hunter to refer back to last week's film. But I feel like what Beatty is saying is that the Ehrenreich character, Frank Forbes, is supposed to be Warren Beatty. That's where this feels a personal film. It starts in 1959 when Warren Beatty came to Hollywood, and he fell under the sway of people like Elia Kazan and William Inge and forget who it was, Charles, whatever his name, the guy who produced What's New Pussycat. And so he was this young guy who fell under the sway of these powerful men who he later probably learned to see the flaws in. But as a young, idealistic actor, a young guy in Hollywood, and I feel like that's one of the things the film does so well, is it shows, like, it through the young protagonists, they idolize him so much. They're so innocent, so ignorant, so propagandized and really dumb. Like there's the scene, I think one of the best scenes, and it's pretty subtle. It doesn't jump out as one of the best scenes, but one of the most revelatory scenes. There's a scene where Frank and Marla have lunch.
I heard Eisenhower sent him a telegram.
If Eisenhower was really smart, he'd have Howard Hughes just bomb Moscow and have communism over and done with.
I think Howard Hughes should be president.
And you're like, that's a bad idea.
I think the movie tricks the audience into almost being like these characters in a way.
Yeah.
Where, like, you flip-flop between really liking Howard Hughes and really despising him. And I'm not going to give too much away, but like, much like in The Hunter last week's episode, there's a scene of comedy followed by a scene about abortion. And you're like, that's an interesting switch of like, we're laughing at Howard Hughes buying all this ice cream up, and then all of a sudden there's like this harsh scene dealing with abortion, and you're just like, whoa, wait, what? And it's like I was charmed by Howard Hughes for a moment because he's buying all this banana ice cream, and now I'm kind of questioning his character of the way he's talking about certain things, and it's just like it does this dance of like, oh, this is a nice touching scene where he's having a hamburger with Alden Ehrenreich in front of the Spruce Goose or whatever, and then you have these dark things where he's treating women poorly or just sort of like not being a nice guy. So it's a fascinating, like, it's not sticking with the either or type of Howard Hughes. It's giving you both.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, in a way, going back to Citizen Kane, which I was reading in the original creation of Citizen Kane, Howard Hughes was it was potentially going to be about Howard Hughes instead of about William Randolph Hearst. They're similar kinds of characters. But just like with Kane, he's a tragic villain, but we meet him at first as someone who charms us. We're charmed by Wells's portrayal of this guy, and that makes his fall that much more powerful. And we have this experience. And I think, again, that's something that Beatty does really well. And I think you're right to compare this to Shampoo. Again, sometimes we don't care about spoilers, but I feel like with this one, with so many people not seeing it, I want to let them just have the journey. But this does have a very Shampoo type ending where our hero, like, it's one of the things I love about Beatty's work. And some people will say, oh, this is very self-congratulatory of him or whatever, but his films almost always have tragic endings for his characters. And I just love that about I love that about his films, that he uses himself as an actor in this way that a lot of times, not always, like when Bulworth has his sad end, even that, you feel like he deserves it. That's it. Yet the end of his movies, even though he deserves what happens to him, you still feel really sad. Yeah. Because he has brought you into the world of that person. And at the same time, you don't leave the movie thinking, God, Howard Hughes was a good guy. You just feel like you didn't get to just easily write him. You didn't get to easily love him or easily hate him. You have to. It's like Kane. You have to just feel him and feel what the movie feels about him. And the way that Beatty is able to tell this big historical story and this deeply romantic story, and also be telling us all the time about him. That's, to me, that's masterful filmmaking. That's my favorite kind of filmmaking. So let's move on to some of the highlights in this, because I feel like there are some real, like, some highlight scenes. You mentioned one, I think the scene where Beatty first meets Frank Forbes, the Ehrenreich character, pretty much does everything in this movie. It's a horror scene. He's a terrible, terrible person in it, but it's super charming. It's a beautiful, charming scene between these two characters. It makes you see why he falls in love with the Frank Forbes character, even as it's sort of like he's sort of toying with him. And then it has this just delicious reveal, which you kind of gave away back there. I don't want to ruin that. That shot is such a great visual joke, but we'll leave it in. But what were some of your highlight scenes from the film, or if you want to talk about that scene?
Let's talk about that scene, because that is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen an actor do ever in a movie ever. It was very strange. My wife pointed it out too. We were both like, that is Nicolas Cage level strange. It's like, no actual human being does this, and what does this mean about the actor doing this? But like, they're sitting having hamburgers, and then Alden Ehrenreich is trying to talk to. I think this is when he first starts pitching the idea of building the homes. Like, his character Frank has like this idea
for real estate in the Hollywood Hills. Sorry.
So he's holding his burger and talking, and as he's talking, he lowers the burger below the table onto his lap. He's basically holding the burger below the table while he's talking. No human being eats a hamburger like that. Why doesn't he put it on the plate? Why is he holding it down below the table? That's so crazy. Who does that? And is that intentional? Was it written that way? What an odd thing for a person to do. Would you have ever done that with a hamburger? I was just completely baffled by that. That was the most confusing thing in this whole movie.
Oh my God. That's why, again, I've seen this movie 7 or 8 times. I've never noticed that. That's why I love doing this podcast with you.
What would a Howard Hughes think of that? A man who's obsessed with germs and cleanliness, and he's watching this man hold the food below the table, basically brushing against the table and just holding it on his pants. You can get mustard on the pants. It's so they were big burgers. They're sloppy. So what an odd thing. What an odd thing for a person to do. You put it on the table. You put it back on the plate. If you're eating it, either you're talking while you're eating over the plate, or you put it on the plate. You don't put the food underneath the table. So weird.
Oh my God.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people like to take their food and just brush it under the table of a restaurant or wherever. But I was just like, that is so weird. My favorite part of the whole movie.
Wow. I would never have guessed that. I mean, first of all, I didn't even see that. Now I have to go back and watch it again just for that. Because I think there's a lot of great things in that scene, but that is not the thing I noticed.
And then my favorite part of the movie, the funniest part for me, was when the little kid, with ice cream, runs in to where Howard Hughes is sitting with people, and Howard Hughes yells, "Get that person out of here!" And I think referring to as a child as that person is very good. I think that's really funny. And that was the best line delivery, I think.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say that your favorite was the Oliver Platt stuff, because I feel like
that is so good.
Now, did you recognize Steve Mnuchin in those scenes?
No, I wouldn't know what that guy looked like. I know the name, and I know the person, but I wouldn't know what he actually looks like. So
Yeah. So, and of course, Oliver Platt is hilarious in that. And there's an interesting synchronicity for me personally with that. If I may, if you'll indulge me for a second, the other guy. So, of the Merrill Lynch guys, there's Oliver Platt, who we covered in The Imposters. It's his second appearance on the show. And there's Steve Mnuchin. But the other guy is an actor named Jeff Pearson, who is sort of he's a guy you recognize as being a character actor from many TV shows and movies. But, and here's the synchronicity, he was also in an episode of Alien Nation called Green Eyes, and I was in that episode. And in that episode called Green Eyes, I had a scene at the Griffith Park Observatory, which I was very excited about as a fan of Rebel Without a Cause, that I got to shoot a scene at the Griffith Park Observatory. And Griffith Park is the site of the Hollywood sign, and the land around the Hollywood sign was owned by Howard Hughes from the 1930s to 2002. What does it mean? Nothing. But this is how I watch movies. I project myself onto them, and then because I was actually in I just thought it was nice, like a 3 or 7 degrees of Andros Jones in this. I got a kick out of it.
The only actor I have a relationship to in this movie is there's a dog in the movie.
Lucky.
Do you remember the scene with the beautiful dog?
Yeah. Jumpy?
The dog's name is Jumpy. And if I may tell a quick anecdote that's very funny about Jumpy the dog. So Zach and I had this meeting, and we were trying to pitch this. We had this passion project of Zach's about a Nazi hunter that he wanted to make. They're based on true events, a true story, and it dealt with a lot of being a Jewish man in America and about the Holocaust, anti-Semitism, and all these things that mean a lot to Zach and me, but more to Zach because he's actually Jewish and I'm not. And so we were pitching the show, and it's like a really hard drama full of it's like the least funniest thing either of us have ever written, but we were really proud of it. We thought it was really good. And we go, I won't say who, but we pitched this idea to this company. We're in this room with this guy. And then he starts opening up about his experience with anti-Semitism and his experience with his family surviving the Holocaust. And the conversation gets very deep. It's like a very deep, way longer than the meeting should have been. This meeting already was over an hour, and we're in this, we're on a studio lot in this meeting room. And we talk about this big thing, and the whole time Zach and I are like, oh, maybe this guy is passionate enough to make this thing. Maybe he'll make our script come true. And then after we all open up about our life experiences, he stops and's like, so I got this script that will star Jumpy the dog. Do you guys want to do that? It's going to be Home Alone with Jumpy the dog. And we're like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, that's what we want to do with you guys. Jumpy the dog movie. I'm like, no. And we're like, okay. We thought I found that very amusing when I saw Jumpy the dog's name in the end credits. This was a movie they made instead. Rules don't apply with Jumpy the dog.
This film has everything. You stare into this film and you will find yourself in it somewhere.
R.I.P. Jumpy.
Is Jumpy no longer?
He passed away. This was his last film.
Oh,
sadly passed away. They never got to make the Home Alone with Jumpy. But
it was once again like our Hunter episode. They when they were cutting it, they were like they couldn't get over the feelings of nostalgia for Jumpy's career. Maybe that affected the romanticism, the deep soulfulness of this film.
It's funny, his first screen role in a Terrence Malick movie, Knight of Cups. So there you go, full circle in our conversation.
Ah, yeah.
So that when I watched it, I was like, "There's going to be more of Jumpy the dog, right?" Not the case. Just like Ed Harris, they didn't go. They just that's the casting. That's the plot. Intentionally casting Jumpy.
Yeah, that's Warren Beatty. He gets A-list for everyone in his films. Okay, so let's talk about the diegetic music in this film. Marla Maybury and Annette Bening get brought to their home in the Hollywood Hills, and Frank Forbes lets them out into their yard, and they hear this music, this orchestral music, and it feels like it's the music in the film, but they say,
Where in the world is that coming from?
Goodness.
That's the Hollywood Bowl down there. I think they're rehearsing.
Really? $400 a week on top of this.
I just thought that was a really clever way to mess with our idea of what's true. It's like the F for fake factor. Like it really, the way the music shows up, it really feels like film music. But then the film says, no, that's real. A lot of things in this film may be fake, but that music is real. And then we get the song. Now, did you like the song? I loved the song.
No, I think that was great. And I think, like, was that written for this movie?
Yeah, it was written by a songwriter named Lorraine Feather and Eddie Arkin.
One day I told my friend I was terribly blue.
And it's like, that was a great song, and it's a sad, the world is wrong in that wasn't nominated for like best song for an Oscar. Like, why wasn't it? Because this movie nobody saw, so they're going to just put some other 5 songs?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Come on. Like that's you're like, I think that's maybe like when she sings it, that's like kind of the emotional highlight for me in the movie. Like, I thought that she, like, you're right, that scene is done so, it's kind of raw and just really, it feels so real. Like, it feels really believable, that part. And I really like the way she does it, and it's like, it's really touching and really good.
I literally cannot even think about the song without crying. That's how much that song moves me. It's so, help me figure it out. Is there? I'm going to say right now. I've been trying to think if there is another film that uses an original song being performed within the film that's as good and as impactful as this. Like, I think about like Keith Carradine stuff in Nashville. I like Keith Carradine less after he sings. And going back to Steve McQueen, I talked in our last episode about go back to look at the film Baby the Rain Must Fall. That's Steve McQueen playing a singer. Doesn't work. It's okay, but it doesn't work like this. Like, you can just, maybe it's because she's Phil Collins' daughter, so she just knows she just grew up in listening to people who are real singers really sing, and they don't sing. Like, even some people might think that Phil Collins is sort of over the top, but he's not over the top compared to the way people sing in movies. He really sings. Can you think of another film that uses an original song that effectively? That's not a musical.
High Anxiety.
Well, yeah. Okay.
Anxiety.
I love that film.
Whenever you're near, high anxiety, it's you that I fear. My heart's afraid to fly, it's crashed before. But then you take my hand, my heart starts to soar once more. High anxiety.
Seriously, I don't know. I'm trying to think of and like what's great is like the song is about the title of the movie, and there's themes in the song, and it's just like it really does such a good. It's a really I'm trying to like rack my brain as to other movies that do that well.
While you're thinking about it, like one of the things that I love, just like these subtle things, like so it shows up at the beginning. She just sort of plays right after that Hollywood Bowl thing. She's still tinkering with it. I'm a songwriter, so I think so she's playing the melody a little bit on the piano, but she hasn't written the song yet. And then she has the scene where Frank tells her that line, and then she turns it into a song, and then she plays that song for him, and it's beautiful. And that's, I think, one of the high point scenes in the movie. Later, she plays the same song for Hughes, but then she sort of it's great because she's diminished in some ways, like well, I guess I'll give it away. She has a drink in this movie. Sorry, people. Spoiler alert. The Apple Blossom Queen who never had a drink. At some point in this movie, she has a drink. And then she plays the song, and she plays it really honestly the way someone who has had a few drinks would play it. Like, she misses just the right amount of notes on the piano. She sings it just the right amount off key, but it's still beautiful. And it's carrying more weight than just a song because of the way that it's subtly performed. And then it has this big moment at the end, which is like, I don't know, it just brings together Kane and the conversation and all of these great sort of cinematic references, and it never loses the deeply romantic Hollywoodness of that song. Oh God, I just love the use of it. And that's Beatty loving romantic Hollywood movies, and also Beatty the piano player. If you listen to the very end, there's this part at the very end of the credits, someone plays Hooray for Hollywood, just really plunking it out on the piano. Dun, 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 dun. And I haven't read it anywhere, but I'm almost sure that's Beatty. Because he's a piano player. It's the last notes of what is probably his last film,
Maybe, yeah.
And that I would love to ask him. That's the question. That's the thing that bugs me about. That's one of the ways the world is wrong about this film, is that in all the press that he did, all the interviews, nobody asks him the right questions. And that's one of the questions I would have asked. If you think of any other songs, any other movies that have, if you're listening, write to us if you think there are other films that used a song, an original song, that effectively as diegetic music. I would love to hear it. Particularly performed music in a film. So a couple of other highlight scenes. You mentioned the Steve Coogan scene where a clearly diminished Howard Hughes decides to take Frank Forbes for his first flight. And this is where we have one scene with Steve Coogan. And I have some thoughts about this scene, but you clearly have some as well. Before I lay mine on you, what did you take from this?
I think this is definitely one of the more obvious attempts at comedy in the movie. Like, to me, this scene is supposed to be funny, and having the presence of a Steve Coogan, who you're automatically like, it's Steve Coogan, it's gonna be funny. And I think this was maybe where most of the budget went, because it looks really good. It's clearly not a real plane, I don't think, but it looks like $1 million. And this movie in general looks like $1 million. The colors pop, and it looks really I was shocked that it was so low budget. The 35 seemed low for any movie these days. But yeah, I just really it's just an unexpected scene of what feels like comedy.
Comedy, but did you feel the Kubrick on this?
Like it's a little bit Dr. Strangelove, and Coogan's doing sort of the Peter Sellers character in the plane.
Yeah. I felt like he was doing Mandrake, and there's Up in the Plane, and the whole thing of him singing, telling the Al Jolson story and singing.
What they say about Dixie. Does the sun really shine?
While turning the plane's engines off, and just that had this air. It felt like Slim Pickens singing doing the woohoo.
Yeah.
And you can imagine that's it's funny for us. It's it's comedy, but from the standpoint of Frank Forbes, it's more like Strangelove. This is terrifying. It's terrifying on so many levels. He's talking about Al Jolson in blackface singing I don't know. I couldn't help but think of both of our current presidential candidates. I could see either Joe Biden or Donald Trump pulling that shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that I'm curious. I was curious if you felt the Kubrickness of that, because it definitely hit me that way.
I didn't at the time, but now that you're talking about it, I'm like, totally. That totally is Dr. Strangelove.
And if that's the case, again, there's this way that, like, I feel like Beatty is in this film is saying, I'm giving you all my big swings. This is, okay, Wells, here I come. I'm coming for you. Stanley Kubrick, okay, I'm coming for you. Like, he's just, all of my previous movies, I'm coming for you. He's just knocking down everything. You know, he's a contemporary of Kubrick. And he definitely has talked about learning from him as a director. He has that, you know, that many, many takes, just like he's very different, but I think similar in the sense of, I'm going to be an indie and do things my way and take as long as I need to. And I'll shut things down if it's not the way I want it to be. I could go into some more high points in the film. Sort of, there are a lot of scenes that are great, but I think it would mean divulging more of the movie than I want to. But there are a lot of great scenes in this film. Any other ones that you wanted to discuss that really hit you?
I really like the part. I think that Matthew Broderick is great in this movie, and the part when he has kind of his breakdown, is fantastic. Like, that is some good comedy. That's some good acting. As Matthew Broderick bringing it, I think he is great. I think that, and that scene in particular is very funny and very good.
Yeah. He's great all throughout. He's the one who tells us all the information, right? He's the one who tells us what the rules are. We see Marla and Frank falling in love through his eyes. He sees what's going on before the characters do. And he's great in that scene. He's pretty creepy in some scenes too.
Yeah. He's constantly trying to ask out Lily Collins, like, in a creepy way, not in a nice gentlemanly way, but just sort of like, hey, you know, if you want to just like go to this back alley right now, or, you know, just like that kind of level of hitting on, of like, you know, if you just want to like come to my room just immediately right now.
Yeah, and I think so. Funny. Is that, like, there's something about this, like, Beatty lived through all of this time. Like, he starts his film in 1959 and he ends his film on November 23rd, 2016. In a way, when it's released, all of that scope is in it. And I think the real question is, for some people, is going to be, is this film, and that's a question throughout Beatty's film career, is this film celebrating that, the sort of that era and the sexual politics of it? Is it mocking it? Is it condemning it? Is it just having a sophisticated look at it that does all of the above in different ways? I mean, we're two guys looking at it, and I think that probably for a woman looking at it, they're going to take something different from it.
Yeah.
But we're supposed to believe that Warren Beatty is this romantic character for Lily Collins, which is not how I saw it at all. I thought it was pretty clear that he was a monster from the jump. I don't think there's ever a point where we're supposed to be rooting for him to get together with Lily Collins, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you think about, just in general, how, well, yeah, the sexual politics of this film? Do you feel like this is a feminist film, or in that it is unmasking the sexual politics of that era, or that it's more like reveling in them?
I think it's like, it's hard. I think it's hard. I think it's like the whole movie. It's really hard to read. It's like really, like when you're watching it, you're like, well, this seems a little more whimsical than it should be. But wait, these people are recognizing that it's fucked up. But wait, but this person's fine with it. But this person's not fine with it. And it'd be interesting, like, this is 2016, so it's like right before all the Harvey Weinstein stuff blew up. Because that was, when was that, 2017, 2018? When the whole Me Too thing got big. before, it was after this movie. So I wonder, like, if this had come out or was made a year or two later, if they would have to actually, like, redo those scenes and make it more clear the intention of it being creepy, if that is the intention at all. Because, yeah, there's times where the movie seems out of touch based on where we're at in 2020. And considering this movie is only 5 years old, that's interesting. But, like, so much has happened in the last 5 years about this kind of way Hollywood treated actresses, or treats actresses. And, like, I think it might make it more clear if it were made now, or maybe Warren Beatty would like to keep it nebulous. But it feels nebulous. And it feels like, and I would wonder if it was 2016 and I watched this for the first time, if I would not had be like, oh God, this is creepy. Or if I'd be like, oh, what a weirdo doing these things. But I don't know, like this part when he's talking to, or they're walking around and he's talking about like, oh, we should have like keys to like these women and like keep them like basically like really make sure we keep an eye on all of them. I don't think we're supposed to be like, aha, you're right, Howard Hughes. I think we're supposed to think, ugh. So I think it's kind of clear at parts, but it's like, yeah, it's kind of like, it's hard. It's because it's hard not to, like, when you see everyone in their costumes and the color and the music, to be like, oh, this feels whimsical the way that they're being paid by lowering their checks from the window, or that they're all given champagne and locked in these little houses, and like the beginning montage where they're all being picked up at their various bungalows, being brought to be in a Hollywood movie. But I mean, that's also kind of how Hollywood works, or used to work, is like you charm these people and they're promising all these great things and how great it'll be, and then it sets in later, or maybe too late, like, oh, this is fucked up, oh, this is not good.
Yeah. There are two things I wanted to share. So first of all, one of the, supposedly, according to Beatty, his initial inspiration for doing a Howard Hughes film was when he was at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And I guess there was a whole thing where he was being tailed, or he was being treated like he was some interloper. And it turned out that Howard Hughes had rented out all of the bungalows at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And he just thought, well, and this is probably pre-Shampoo. And I can almost see how it's like, that's almost like it's also parallel to Shampoo, like this idea of like, well, that opens up some real comic possibilities of, and they play into that, like with the Merrill Lynch guys not being able to find him. I feel like that bit of comedy was at the genesis of it. But when we're thinking about that, it's hard not to also think that Warren Beatty had lots of love affairs or one-night stands with people who were fans and saw him in this elevated way in those exact bungalows. And even there's a scene where Lily Collins is like, if all the stories about you and women were true, you wouldn't have time to fly a plane, let alone build one. And I feel like that's definitely speaking to Warren Beatty, speaking to misperceptions about his image. And it's so like, it's really like, I don't pretend to know the truth about this, so I can only just be caught up in like, okay, well, this is him speaking to his legend and muddying the waters there. I have there's basically one really false note for me on this rewatch, because I was really watching it this last time trying to think. I'm almost sort of like trying to mansplain it or womansplain it to myself while I'm watching it, like be as critical as I possibly can be. And there's one scene in the bungalow with Hughes and Lily Collins where it's the most, where things get intimate, I guess. We'll just say that. And the music that they go to is purely comedic and goofy. And that was the one point when I was watching where I was like, ooh.
Yeah.
That was just the wrong. I think it's like Tequila. Like they're playing like, and it's like, this is not good. What's happening here?
And like I said, you can change all this music and make it into this like dark not comedy, sinister.
Yeah, this could be
movie.
Mulholland Drive.
It's like Mulholland
Exactly.
Drive.
But I
yeah.
think that's why I love Warren Beatty, because he makes films that are really tough at their center, but are really bright. Like Shampoo is like that. Like Shampoo is so fun on the surface, but it's so dark and disturbing at its core, and not for the obvious reasons. In this way of just like the whole system, like that's what he's able to like unmask these corrupt and absurd systems just by letting them exist and letting his characters be oblivious to them, but we see it. Like, and I just think that's such an awesome trick to be able to make movies that both flatter and indict at the same time. And I think maybe it's because he's an actor at the center of them, and he's able to do that trick. Like another actor, if he was working with another actor, they might not trust him enough to let him make them as pathetic and as much of a villain and trust that it's still going to be charming in a movie. Like he knows how to use himself, and he always subverts Warren Beatty in his films. And that ends up making both Warren Beatty, the director, and Warren Beatty, the actor, look better. And it would be very hard to over and over again convince other leading actors to allow you to do that with them. You know, and I think that's where he gets called out for being controlling, but I think it's that level of control that allows him to also be really, I don't know, humble is the wrong word, but just be really revealing in a brutal way. Anyway, I told you this one might go long. This one, I have a lot to say about this movie. But we should probably start to move on. Any final thoughts on the film? Would you recommend it to someone?
I would recommend it to everybody because I think it's a movie it's a hard watch. It's not a fun movie in the way that people think it would be. I think it is a movie that requires attention. Like you can't be looking at your phone and watch this movie. This is like I got to set aside 2 hours and watch this movie. So I would recommend it to the people that have that time to really give it attention.
And I know that your film watching time is more limited than mine, but I'm curious, are you interested in going back and watching this film?
Someday. Someday I will. Now that you've told me, I feel like hearing it from you, it's kind of honed in on the problem areas that have made it a little more clear in my mind now that I can just, or, you know, I have a good memory. I can play the movie in my head again now tonight for 2 hours while I'm in bed and hit on all those things and go, oh, okay. And then maybe a month later I'll be like, my favorite movie.
Hey babies, it is me, the self-appointed Commissioner of Comedy, James Matter. I just want to tell you that every week I'll be wherever you listen to podcasts with my show, The Commissioner of Comedy. I've been doing this, babies, for almost 20 years, grinding up and down, and I'm here to convey it to you about the do's and don'ts of the comedy scene, the proper etiquette, the unwritten rules, if you will. Whether you're just a fan, or you're a young buck starting out, a grizzled old vet, or just someone who wants to peek behind the curtain and see how the sausage gets made, tune into the podcast, The Commissioner of Comedy. This is what it's about. It's only on Paper House Network, and it's for you, babies. It's for you.
So, aside from hosting this podcast, you also, or co-hosting this podcast, you also co-host the Director's Wall with AJ Gonzalez. And even though we're recording this in August and you are in the middle of, well, you're on the verge of covering Apocalypse Now, by the time this comes out, what film do you think you'll be on? Just take a guess.
Let's see, because this is we're now in October, I think, with this. I would say we're probably at the Cotton Club. I'll just throw that out there. Cotton Club seems right. 84, mid 80s.
Because Cotton Club is.
So we'll see.
Is
if
that
I'm right.
after Gardens of Stone or before Gardens of
I
Stone?
think it's right before.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess Gardens of Stone.
Okay. All right, we'll see. We'll see who's right.
We'll see who's
When we're
right.
Recording whatever episode in October, I'll be like, aha! We were both wrong. It's Captain EO. So you never know.
Oh shit! I forgot Captain EO.
The world is wrong about Captain EO.
Oh wow! I've never even seen Captain EO.
You know what? I'm excited.
Have you?
Oh yeah, many times.
Oh wow! Okay, woo! I'm excited. As should you, listeners. Follow the Director's Wall. They cover a director's entire career. They did M. Night Shyamalan, and now, of course, they're in the middle of Frankie Ford Coppola. Frankie Forbes. Oh, Francis Ford, Frank Forbes.
It's all coming together.
Okay. Well.
And we can find you on the great Radio 8 Ball podcast. What guest do you think you'll have by the time people are listening to this? I was recently on there. It was great. So that episode's now been long posted by the time you hear this, and it was fun. We got to shake the Radio 8 Ball. I asked a great question. We got an interesting answer. But yeah, I don't know. Who do you have coming up that will have already then been out by the time?
The way we do this is that it's a musical divination show, and that means we answer questions by picking songs at random and interpreting them like musical tarot cards. And for our current season, our third season during COVID, we're using the Radio 8 Ball app, which is filled with every song recorded in the history of Radio 8 Ball. You can download it for free from the iTunes App Store. And so all of the musicians the songwriters who are in it are potential guests. So on your episode, you asked a question and you got a song that was answered by Ian Moore, who is a great songwriter originally from Austin, Texas, where you live. And I've been trying to reach him about being the guest next week. So there's no way I can know who will be our guest in October. But if I'm going to guess, let's see, October, why not, how about, I'm trying to think of who's scary, who's the most frightening artist in it. Maybe John Auer of the Posies, because he's been on the show many times, and his songs haven't come up yet. And there's a few people who are like big names who are in it, and I'm always hoping they get picked, but also dreading it because I know it's going to be hard to get them, and there's a chance they'll say no. And even though I act like that doesn't matter to me, it breaks my heart. So maybe it'll be John Auer.
Great.
And go on.
We'll see if you're right.
And do we even know what our next film is? So let's just let the listeners in on this. This is our 8th film that we've covered, and basically what we do, the way we pick these is we pick 4 each, and then we do a series of 8, and then do the next series. And I think we know what we should look at the calendar. Do we know what the next one we're going to cover is, Brian?
Well, we're getting into Halloween time. We're getting into scary, spooky horror movies. So, of course, we're going to do an episode about Bob Roberts.
Boob Roberts. Which actually kind of goes with, because Warren Beatty did Bulworth, and Bulworth is sort of like has a Bob Roberts-y kind of quality to it as a film. So there's some connective tissue.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. Well, unless you have anything else to add, Brian?
No, I'm happy for the world and for us.
Okay, well, that world that you are so happy about, just remember, people, the world is wrong, and it's probably wrong about you.
That's water. From Maine.
said it very simply and quietly too, but as if there wasn't any doubt at all that he knew. He gave me a gift that I would treasure. He said the rules don't apply to you. In the movies we see, in the shows on TV, and in anthems passionately sung, there's a message that you've got to keep believing in yourself, but they generally mean if you're young. Is it written in the air, as it seems to be, that we haven't long at all to find our destiny? I'll always remember to be grateful that the rules don't apply to me. Told my friend I was terribly blue. Was it far too late to do what I dreamed I could do? He thought for a moment, then he answered. He said the rules don't apply to you. He said it very simply and quietly too, but as if there wasn't any doubt at all that he knew. He gave me a gift that I would treasure. He said the rules don't apply to you. In the movies we see, in the shows on TV, and in anthems passionately sung, there's a message that you've got to keep believing in yourself, but they generally mean if you're young. Is it written in the air, as it seems to be, that we haven't long at all to find our destiny? I'll always remember to be grateful that the rules don't apply to me. I wouldn't lie. The rules don't apply. The rules don't apply.
Hi, I'm Brian.
And I'm AJ.
And we have a podcast called The Director's Wall,
examining a filmmaker's career, film by film. First up was M. Night Shyamalan, then Francis Ford Coppola. Who's next? Is there anything to this whole auteur theory? Find out on
The Director's Wall.
Subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or your preferred